I was born in a small town where the mosque and the church were neighbours, and the morning air carried both the muezzin's call and the cracked tambourine of our choir mistress. My skin learned sunlight early, how it warms the back of a girl, bent over a basin of Sunday whites, how it gilds the dust, lifting from dancing feet, when the Spirit moves people into praise. They called me a church girl, a chorister, Sister Ago, and I wore that name like clean linen. I learned the language of God in songs first, then in scriptures, then in the quiet way my mother's eyes rested on the people who suffered. When I came to Ica, the city smelled of diesel and roasted maize and rain that had not yet fallen. I found my brother's one-room apartment neat and waiting, the bed already made, the kettle shining like a small moon on the stove. I found a church the same week. I stood in the back pew the first Sunday, just to watch the river of worship flow. But by the second, I was in the choir stand, my hands lifted, my voice threading through harmonies like a needle mending a rip in the sky. Favor followed me like a shadow that had never learned to detach. Free rides to work from uncles with kind eyes. Lunches pressed into my hand from aunties who said, "You remind me of my younger self. Take this, and no too much." Even strangers saw me and smiled as if a familiar song had just begun. I took nothing for granted, not even the breath between verses. My elder brother, Eugene, helped me secure a receptionist job at a firm with glass doors and cold air that lifted the small hairs on my arms. I sat behind the desk with a scarf on my shoulders, greeting people, directing them, stamping their hours into our book as if time needed a border. He came on a Tuesday, the kind of day that sits on your shoulder like a quiet bird, a young man with a blue shirt and a tie that knew it's not well. He asked for the manager, and I gave him the practiced smile of a woman who knows the weight of first impressions. His voice was patient, his words neither too fast nor too slow. When he finished his business, he turned to me and said, "Thank you for your kindness," and left a small wrapped thing beside the ledger. I waited till he was gone before I opened it. Chocolate, dark, with a tiny gold ribbon like a laugh. The next day he returned, not to see anyone but me. "Good day," he said, standing a little to the side of the desk, as if he didn't want to block the doorway of my attention. "I couldn't get over how you held yourself yesterday. Do you? Mind if I sit a while?" We spoke about small things first, like people wading into a river with careful feet, the weather, our city's favourite arguments, the green that comes after harmattan, like a promise fulfilled. Then he told me his name, Isu, and that he was a junior pastor, and my heart made a small bow without my permission. Light recognizes light. We exchanged numbers with the decency of those who fear God enough to fear themselves. And after work, he called, and we did not notice time folding itself like napkins after a feast. Still, Sundays belong to the one who holds all days. At church, after the last Amen, there was always a man waiting just outside the doors, where the sunlight gathered like warm oil. Ugo was his name. His face carried a certain calm that looked like shyness from far away. He would say, "Sister Ago, your voice, God used it for balm today," and look down as if the compliment embarrassed him. I said, "Thank you the first Sunday, thank you again the next." And then he began to bring small gifts, ground nuts in a paper cone, a book with frayed pages that smelled like the library of a diligent angel. I thought nothing of it at first. The church is a place where kindness multiplies like loaves, and I, who had known favor, thought myself merely a conduit. But gifts become sentences, and sentences become questions. When Ugo asked to take me to lunch one afternoon, I heard my own voice say, "Yes," and felt time tilt. He waited until our plates sat half sad in the late light, and then he cleared his throat like a drummer calling the band to order. "Ego," he said. "I have prayed, I have asked, I have waited. In dreams I see you in white, smiling. And when I come near to sing with you, heaven opens. You are the one." My mouth forgot how to be a mouth. "Brother, I will pray," I said finally. Because what else do we say when the ground moves? And the next morning, before the city pulled on its clamor, Isu asked me to. The same words, folded differently. "Let me be your husband," he said, with the simple courage of a man who has looked into his own heart and found a clean room. When love comes in twos, discernment must arrive with a chair and sit. I knelt on the small mat beside my bed and named each man to God, as if reading out loud at the customs of my soul. "Lead me," I whispered. "I do not want to trade a lifetime for a moment's applause." I took their pictures and full names to my pastor, like offering. He nodded, promised to pray, said he would wait for God to breathe in his direction. I told Eugene, my brother, the first watchman at the gate of my life. He rubbed his forehead and said what men who love you say when fear is a faithful companion. Marriage builds or breaks. Wolves wear wool. Let me see them both. Isu arrived first. He and my brother found each other like old friends who had not yet met. Questions became laughter. Laughter became that relaxed silence men use when they respect each other. When he left, Eugene said, "He is a good man, but let me not rush the spirit." Ugo came days later, quiet, shoulders folded like a letter that feared its message. Eugene treated him warmly, offered him a soda, asked about his work painting houses till they shine like new names. But when Ugo left, my brother's face changed. He shut the door and turned to me slowly. "There is a strange cloud around him," he said, his voice a low drum. "I do not trust this one." How do you weigh one authority against another when both speak in the accent of certainty? The pastor called me into his office. The leather chair made a sermon of its own. "Sister Ago," he said, "both men are favored, but favor has ranks. Isu is a pastor, yes, but we do not know him within our fold. Ugo we have watched, we have tested, we can vouch for him." He said, "Vouch," as if it were a wall that could not be climbed. I nodded, but my heart was still a storm. I went home and lay on the cool tile, my cheek against it, the way a child puts her ear to her mother's chest to hear the metronome of safety. "Speak," I begged, and thought I heard wind through palm fronds answer me. I said yes to Ugo. Isu cried on the phone, not the loud crying of a man who performs grief, but the soft breaking of someone who had let hope walk barefoot across his chest. "Pray again," he asked. "I will be good to you." I pressed the phone to my ear and shut my eyes until I saw red like the inside of lids can be a sunset. "I have chosen," I whispered, and the line went quiet. When Eugene heard, rage took a chair at our table and would not rise. "If you marry that man," he warned, "you cease to be my sister. I will not watch you walk yourself into a pit and clap." He had never spoken to me like that, not even the time I shattered his favorite mug, the one that carried our late father's initials, like a blessing. I swallowed something hard and hot. "Brother, God cannot lie," I whispered. He laughed without joy. "Sometimes we sow heaven's name on our own will and call it scripture," he said, then turned his back and took the quiet with him. The wedding wore the joy of many people. Our church was a drum with 1,000 hands. I looked for my brother's face, like a lighthouse, but found only the sea. Near the end, Isu walked up to me. He held out a wrapped gift, Bible and money tucked inside like a benediction. He smiled with the kindness of a man who has decided not to let pain deform him. "May your home know God," he said, and I swallowed my tears until they tasted like salt on the back of my tongue. For a month, My marriage was a song someone forgot to teach the choir how to sing wrong. Ugo brought small gifts when his painting jobs paid. He split his earnings into two, like loaves at a miracle. Every night I ironed his shirts, and he kissed my knuckles like he was memorizing their map. I set a bowl of water at our door to catch dust, and we laughed when lizards did push-ups on the hot wall outside. I told myself, wait, Eugene will see. He will come. He will say, "Sister, forgive me." The day Ugo told me we had to move, the ceiling fan hummed a little too loud. "Work is slow," he said. "We cannot keep this rent." I asked questions like a woman who respects the ledgers of life. How far is the place? What of my job? How will we do church? He said, "It is arranged." With a finality that felt like a door softly closed, we moved to a single room in O2. One window, one fan that pretended to work, one corner where we folded our clothes, like prayers we hoped to wear again. I arranged our small things with the dignity of a queen in exile. I told my voice to keep singing even if it had to be quieter. I did not look for work at once. My heart was busy knitting a child from hope and blood and newness. When the test strip blushed pink, I held it like a miracle that understood how to hide inside a line. Ugo smiled when I told him. He held my face and said, "God is good," and for a moment the room felt bigger. That first night back from our month of softness, Abuja felt louder, as if the city had been waiting to gossip about me. The generator chorus rose at dusk, different pitches from different compounds, a choir of stubborn machines, holding back the dark. I stood on our balcony with a bowl of groundnuts in my hand, shells piling in a little clay saucer, and watched the neighborhood women sweep with long brooms that made the dust dance in the last light. A boy chased a tire down the street and laughed like the future was a kite. He knew how to fly. Odili came up behind me, slid his arms around my waist in that shy way that still surprises me, and rested his chin on my shoulder. We didn't say anything. Some evenings are full enough without words. In the weeks after, I found myself touching ordinary things, as if they were new. The ridges on our wooden table, the oil sheen on pepper soup, the soft belly of a ripe plantain. I kept reaching for tiny proofs that my life had shifted and would not slide back. I woke early and braided my hair in front of the mirror, slow and tight, the way my mother taught me when I was a girl who still believed softness could be rehearsed into permanence. I cooked stew with patience, frying the tomatoes until their anger left them, coaxing the pepper to speak without shouting, laying thyme and bay leaf like blessings. When Dozy and Amanda came on Sundays, I filled their plates recklessly and scolded them for pretending to be full. Amanda's belly rose week by week like a tide that couldn't help itself. I kissed it when she wasn't looking, whispered nonsense into the firm roundness, and felt Kicks answer like knock-knock jokes. One afternoon, the rain came the way it does when clouds forget themselves. Sudden, heavy, insistent, I ran outside laughing, catching buckets under gutters, my wrapper wet and clinging, the compound children squealing and stamping in brown puddles. Odili stood in the doorway, shaking his head as if he hadn't once been the kind to chase rain. "Come!" I shouted, and he came, and we were two fools learning to be young after the world had stamped adult on our foreheads for decades. When the rain tired and moved on, I sat on the step and pressed water out of my wrapper, the sky a clean plate. The air smelled of washed leaves and iron. Somewhere a muezzin called, his voice carrying like a soft rope over fences. I closed my eyes and let the sound tie the present to the past. Peace will always draw trouble to test its weight. The first trouble was small but sharp, like a fishbone that will not go down. It began with whispers from women who had once praised my stubbornness. At the market, hands paused over okra. Voices dropped as I passed. She wore white at her son's wedding, one said, not bothering to lower her tone. What kind of woman takes the bride's day and cuts it in half? Another, love can become a black cloth if you forget to shake it out in the sun. I smiled at them with all my teeth and kept walking. Later, I cried over yam in my kitchen for the foolish girl I had allowed out that day. Then I dried my face and peeled plantain. Life requires both hands. One for sorrow, one for salt. The second trouble carried a familiar name. Umi, my village, the place that had spit me out like a bitter kola nut, began to tug at my thoughts like a stubborn child. I dreamed my mother's courtyard, her hibiscus trees standing like red-mouthed aunties, her cracked basin turned upside down on the veranda to keep cats from sleeping in it. In the dream, I walked through the gate and the earth under my feet recognized my weight. I woke with my heart brimming and my pillow damp. One morning I told Odili, "Take me home." He understood without question. We packed boiled eggs, bread in a black nylon, water in old bottles, and drove before the sun made up its mind about the day. The road to Umi is a long string with beads of small towns, tailors under mangoes, women pounding fufu with pestles heavy as grudges, children waving with both hands. We passed a herd of cattle strolling across the asphalt as if it were their living room carpet. Dust rose and sat on our tongues. At the entrance to the village, the air changed. Older, more opinionated. My feet remembered the way to my father's compound, without directions. The gate leaned, the paint on it giving up in patches. Inside, the house held itself together out of habit. I touched the wall where my mother used to measure our growth with coal lines. I could see my skinny height at 13, my brother's broader mark above mine. I could hear her voice. "Stand straight, ego. Don't cheat." The hibiscus still bloomed, stubborn and precise. The silence showed me where my parents' laughter would have been. We went to the cemetery with a bottle of bitters and a cloth. The graves were small, domestic, as if death here learned to mind its manners. We cleaned the slabs and poured a little drink to cool the earth's throat. "Mama, Papa," I said, and my voice betrayed me by breaking in 3 places. "See me? I found my way. I did not become a scar. I married, even if it is late. I am happy. Your grandson is a good man. He is married to kindness. A child is coming." The wind ran a palm over my head. A goat complained in the distance, like an old uncle asked to help carry something light. Odili's hand found mine and pressed once, twice. When we left, it felt less like departure and more like walking back into a story that finally had room for me. We stayed the night with my mother's cousin, Auntie Felicia, who pretends not to gossip, but whose voice can pull the roof down when she whispers. She cooked white rice and bitter leaf soup, so correct it made me forgive her small sins. After we ate, she held my chin like I was still the girl who tried to read with the kerosene lamp turned low. "You are soft in the eyes," she said. "That's how joy shows itself, on those who suffered too long." I laughed and told her God must be the market woman who finally gave me extra pepper for free. She turned to Odili and scolded him playfully. "If you vex this my ego, I will come to Abuja and scatter your tires." Odili held his ears like a boy. "Auntie, I hear." Back in the city, Amanda called at dawn. "Mother," she whispered, voice thick with a kind of fear only joy brings. "I think it is time." We reached the hospital as the light brightened like a careful lamp. The corridor smelled of Dettol in surprise. Labor is an old drum. I stood outside the door, listening to a song my body remembered. When the baby cried, thin, fierce, indignant, I cried too. A sound pulled from the bottom of my first story. They brought her out wrapped tight, a small bundle of cinnamon and milk. "Nwam," I breathed. "My child." And my mouth remembered the shape of that word, like a long-lost rhythm. "She looks like you," I told Amanda. "She looks like Mercy," Dozy said, voice ruined by tears. We named her Amarachi, Grace of God, because sometimes even obvious things need to be said out loud. Grandmotherhood sits on me like a jewel, tied by a patient hand, secure, a little proud, a little heavy in a good way. I rocked Amarachi with the authority of a woman who had once rocked a future until it fell asleep. I sang the old songs that smell of palm wine and moonlight. Aye, aye, baby rest, and sleep, my child, before the geckos start their gossip. She watched me with grave eyes. When she yawned, the room expanded. When she sneezed, we laughed as if she had invented it. Peace, again, likes to be tested. The market landlady decided our section should be cleared for a development no one asked for. We will build modern stalls, she promised, her earrings shaking like small bells. You will return. We know this song. It ends with women selling under sun that makes the skin remember the word mercy. I gathered the traders whose books I had balanced, whose babies I had once carried on my back while they ran to the toilet. We sat on low stools in the evening heat, wrappers damp with sweat, and made a plan. I went to the council office in my best lace, the one that commands attention without begging. I took my ledger. Names, dates, small loans paid back in little stones of money. I spoke as if I had never once been told to shrink. We are not trees, I told them. We can move, yes, but not like this. Not without shade. Not without time to grow roots again. The chairman looked at my hands, as if the ledger had the power to bite him. We will review, he said, which is the language of procrastination. I stood until he stood. The following day, a temporary canopy appeared. Too small, too few, but a start. Sometimes victory arrives wearing the wrong shoes. The talk about me and my white dress became talk about us, our little wins, our stubborn refusals. The same women who had clicked their tongues folded me back into the circle with the smoothness of long practice. One pressed a ripe mango into my hand. Madam Ego, chop life. I bit into it by the stall, juice running down my wrist, unashamed. Odili took to mending things around the house, like a man trying to woo the future with a hammer. He fixed the wardrobe door that had been threatening to tell our secrets, replaced a stingy shower head with one that rained properly, straightened a crooked shelf, as if straightening time. At night, he told me stories I had missed, while survival was the only language I spoke. How boys fear their fathers' silences. How men sometimes sit on their beds, with shoes still on, because removing them would feel like declaring defeat. How he had walked through years, holding an apology in his mouth with no one to hear it. I put my hand on his chest, counted his breaths, and forgave him for leaving before he knew he had planted a child. Forgiveness, I learned, is not about the past kneeling. It is about the present learning to walk without a limp. Do I miss the girl who sang without sadness in her throat? Yes, but the woman I am becoming has iron in her spine and honey in her mouth. She knows that love is not the absence of hunger, but the presence of a table where both are fed. She knows that family is more than the man you share a bed with. Sometimes it is the market woman who pries truth from your clenched fingers, and the pastor's wife who sends money without making you feel small. She knows that brothers can be prophets in rough clothes, and that apologies might arrive years after the need. She knows that God is not a stamp for our desires, but a river for our feet. Tonight, I will hum a lullaby made from the names of those who held me. Eugene, who tried. Ishu, who bowed out with grace. Mama Chi, who ladled stew into my hand like communion. The nurse who said, "You are fine," as if those words had the power to rearrange bones. I will hum the name of my son, whose breath is the first scripture I have read in months without confusion. And I will hum my own name, Ego, slowly, like a declaration. I am here. I am not a mistake. I am learning the hard way, but I am learning. If Sunday finds us in that office, let it also find me unafraid. If Ugo flares, I will stand. If he softens, I will still stand. It is not rebellion to want bread where you were handed stones. It is not faithlessness to ask for water when someone insists your thirst is a phase. It is not dishonor to admit that the man who lifted you in public set you down in private and forgot to notice if your legs were steady. I am not the first woman to discover that vows need daily bread. I will not be the last to demand it. My city is awake now. I hear the hawkers bargaining with morning, the laughter of school children turning the street into a choir. Somewhere in Ika, a young woman behind a desk smiles at a stranger and does not know that one day she will stand in a small room in O2, counting the breaths of her son like coins, learning what strength tastes like when it is boiled down to its essence. Somewhere, a brother sits with a mug and remembers the sister he blocked with love that looked like fear. Somewhere, a pastor is praying with all the certainty the pulpit encourages. And here, in this modest room with one window and a stubborn fan, I am setting my face like flint and my heart like water, soft enough to flow, strong enough to carve. If you are listening, if my voice has found your ear through the noise of your own troubles, hold this with me. We can tell the truth and live. We can say, this is not what I hoped for, and still hold our heads like queens who remember their crowns. We can ask for help and not be smaller for it. We can love God and still refuse to sanctify our suffering with silence. We can lift our children with one hand and lift ourselves with the other. And if a door must open for light to enter, I will open it, even if it creaks. Even if it reveals dust, I would rather ignore. My name is Ego. My skin keeps the sun's secrets. My voice will not drown in a quiet house. I will go on.